Welcome to the United We Scan podcast, the podcast by rural carriers for rural carriers. The views expressed in this podcast are of the presenters and the presenters only and do not represent the views, opinions, or strategies of the United States Postal Service or the National Rural Letter Carriers Association. We ask that you please consult your assigned union representative for guidance in your local area. Please like this podcast, share with your fellow rural carriers, and subscribe to be notified each time a new episode is uploaded. Please leave a comment or question for us below. Thank you. Now, here are the hosts of the United We Scan podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 122, The Boys Will Play. With Kristen stepping off the podcast to pursue other avenues. The boys are left to play. Me and Bill are here, and we've had Josh step in to actually fill in the third spot, give us a third voice of reason on this podcast, help us out here. And so speaking of that, how was your week, Bill? We'll start with you, and then we'll go to our new special host here.
Well, another exciting week in retirement. Basically, more news out of our SDNC. It's just horrendous. It really is. And I haven't gotten a response back on my art application. So today I put an application in for an RCA in Chester Springs, right down the road from me, just to make sure I can be a full member at come convention time. I'm not betting on anything, so I'm trying to line up my ducks here so that I can go in there and, when somebody says, "When you're retired," and I'll say, "No, I'm not. Here's my union card." But other than that, my son graduated Friday night from the University of Delaware Medical Sciences. In October, he goes to Puerto Rico, joining the Air Force, and they'll pick up the rest of his medical training until he's a full doctor. And my oldest son and his wife are pregnant again. They waited till she was 10 weeks to announce it to make sure everything was going healthy and well this time. She did have a miscarriage earlier last year, and this time the ultrasound showing a healthy baby heartbeat and little head, and he's got a big A tattooed on his head already, take after his grandfather. So I'm all happy about that. And I mean, it's just wonderful news because they're so excited about starting a family. With that, are we going to Josh? How was your week?
My week was good. I have an RCA assigned to my route, even though we're in an SNDC, and she seems to be catching on very quickly. I taught her stuff that she's going to learn next week when she's in the academy. She did have trouble with one section of the route, so we got her a map. We got her very detailed directions because my line of travel, not surprisingly, is wrong. So we got that straightened out, and she had trouble with that section of the route. And I said, guess what? Since you had trouble, you're going to get to do it again today with these good directions. So she is in academy next week, and she comes back to the office on Saturday, I think, and we will continue her training. And I'm just happy to have an RCA, and I told her, you're going to be working a lot. Not just on the fact that you're my RCA and that I go to conventions and conferences and take vacations, but also you're in an SNDC, and by that nature, you're going to be working pretty much all the time. James, how was your week?
That is the saddest thing to hear, and I do feel sorry for every RCA that is in an SNDC, because you may be working in this town Monday, this town Tuesday, this town Wednesday, back to that town Thursday, and covering, maybe helping split routes too if necessary and things like that. Plus you're working probably Amazon Sunday on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully the overtime paycheck is really good, because that's the only way that they're going to actually be happy to be doing that job in any which way, shape, or form, because they sure as hell ain't paid enough on their hourly wages. But
don't even get me started on RCA pay.
But my week was pretty good. On Monday, my supervisor came up to me and said, by the way, we're going to be scheduling you to work Saturday. Um, and she's like, I know you probably are going to want to look into it and stuff, but we made sure it was right. And I did look into it, and they did get it right. They made sure everybody that was the designated holiday was working, as well as all the RCAs that we have. And we're still a little short-handed on RCAs, which is why I had to work my Saturday. But they did do it right. And so the thing I did is I said, you know what? You did do it right. I checked everything. I made sure everything was the way it was supposed to be, and you followed the rules completely. And I believe that positive encouragement like that keeps them from breaking the rules. You know, when they do break the rules, I correct them. But when they are doing it right, I give them praise. It's the way you're supposed to do it. And but other than that, I had 4 box holders this week. 3. I had 1 on Monday that I did not take out. I got 2 more on Tuesday, and then I got a 3rd one on Thursday. And Saturday, I got done in 5.5 hours on my route. The shortest I've ever been on my route. But it was a very light day Saturday. But and then on a side note, personal side, Tuesday I got to work on the layout some more, and I found that spiking railroad track on the layout at the Model Railroad Club is very, very relaxing. It's tedious, but it's very relaxing. So I have found an outlet to calm myself after getting upset over management BS. But all right, let's get into this episode. Now, you guys were talking about SNDCs, and you two both have experience with SNDCs. So, how is that helping or hurting being able to get people to be involved in the union itself? Because I think the biggest issue that we have in this union across the board is just getting everybody to come together on the same page and fight for this craft. Do you think an SNDC can actually help that, hinder that, or no change that? We'll start with you, Bill.
It is.
Okay. Well, to me, it really has very little effect on, recruiting people, because of the fact that you're basically still in your own office. You're in your own little segregated area. And with the Hitler district manager there, you're not allowed to leave your case. You're not allowed to wander around. You can't walk over to the other areas and, basically, have a conversation with anybody. If you're leaving your case, you better be going to get your throwbacks, your hot case, or your parcels, and that's it. I mean, they don't want you wandering around. It's a very rigid atmosphere in regards to what you're allowed to do. It's almost like a prison camp. It really is. There's not, and from coming from Westchester, our office is very lively with interaction among the carriers and the clerks. To this, which is, like I said, almost like a prison camp. It's a startling and drastic change in your atmosphere, and there's not as much support for each other because of the fact that if you step out to say something, you get reprimanded. And I'm trying to figure out, a way for them to rebuttal that type of behavior, but I haven't found anything yet, because of the fact that, if it doesn't directly affect you, you're not to be involved in it. Even if you're a steward, you're not to get involved unless you're, requested, or it's something egregious or flagrant on the floor. The other office in the SDNC, Phoenixville, has nothing to do with Westchester at all. And if it wasn't for Westchester, Phoenixville office would have never realized that back in September, when they had the mini mail survey, that they hadn't gotten their footage done in 3 years at an SDNC. And then when it was brought up, guess what? Phoenixville office turned around and had 4 overburdened routes just on the footage within the office. Nature route even went up to a K level. So that's the problem with this atmosphere, that you're not allowed to exchange ideas or information. You're not allowed to, wander from your area. And to a certain extent, I understand. I'm on your dime, and I'm responsible to carry out my duties in a professional, efficient manner. But one of the nicest things about being a rural carrier was, the interaction among carriers, the way we helped each other. And, even some of the carriers we didn't like, we assisted at times. Uh, we learned to get over that after a couple of years. But the fact of the matter is, we've always tried to provide assistance up front to people who are struggling in some fashion. Well, whether it's with their route, whether it's with management and all. And the SDNC to me suffocates that type of cooperation and atmosphere between the carriers. Now, in my particular SDNC, I've got the carriers up in a riot right now because of the fact that a former ADR and facilitator is doing the route adjustments. And I brought to everybody's attention that route adjustments are a management function. So anything at all that gets done by this person that doesn't meet anybody's likes or pleasures ought to be grieved automatically because of the fact that management did not do the adjustments. And not only is he not doing the adjustments in the SDNC, he's actually going to other offices and doing route adjustments. Therefore, I think this person ought to be kicked out of the union, period. If you want to be in management, go in management. But the fact of the matter is that craft members aren't allowed to do management, level work. And he's a Monday drop day. He's got 28, 30 years in. And if his doesn't drop down to a 43 and somebody with a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday drop day drops down all the way to a 43, there's going to be hell to pay because I've already got everybody informed and said, these are the articles you want to invoke, go after them. Because right now, people are losing too much money. And, when I'm sitting there looking at $10,000, $12,000 pay cuts, Lord, how you going to make it? And if you're on table 2, God bless you. It's a mess. But there isn't a lot of interaction, James. There's not a lot of avenues for us to involve people. And unfortunately, just like Westchester prior to going to the SDNC, there are people who just want to go in, do their job, get the hell out, and go home. There's others who want to go in, do their job, get paid, and have you, stand up for them, but they don't want to stand up for themselves. So that dynamic hasn't really changed at all at the SDNC. There's just a lot less conversation on the floor. Gosh.
The SNDC, it's not complete yet because toward the end of the year we're going to have probably 50 or 60 more routes come in. So we're online, but we don't have everybody in there. And I'm a little bit cynical. I'm like, what's this going to be like at Christmas? Because we're all on top of each other now. But imagine when you put 50 or 60 more routes. Oh, and by the way, we have to go through a mini mail survey after that. And how many routes are they going to make? So I hear you, Bill. I will say this. It does give me an opportunity being at an SNDC to address more carriers at one time than if I were at my office.
You'll find out, depending on whoever's running the show there, whether or not you can involve those other carriers.
Yes.
Like I said, ours is run like a prison camp.
I think it helps at mine that I taught Academy in the same building that became the SNDC for almost 4 years. So I know most of the managers in the city and in that building specifically. So I think this may be my naivety kicking in, but I think I have gotten myself into their good graces. Not trying to brown nose anybody, but just because I've been in that building for so long teaching. And our SDNC it's pretty much, you come in, you do your job. As long as you do your job, management's not really going to have it out for you. Maybe I'm just a unicorn.
Speaking of more people to reach out to, like you said, Josh, the ballots came out for the tentative agreement, and a lot of states are getting their ballots for their national convention delegates for each state. Do you think it makes it easier to talk with the carriers about getting them to vote for it, as is the most important thing that any dues-paying member of the union can do is vote for the tentative agreement and vote for delegates for national convention? Do you think it helps out with
Yes,
that, Josh?
it helps out because I was able to, as part of the stand up about 2 or 3 times this week, I was able to go up there after management finished their spiel about whatever needed to be done. And I was able to say, look, guys, and I want to be specific because I know this is being recorded and I know people listen to it. So I want to be very measured in what I say. I want you to bring sealed ballot, ratification, and national delegate. I want it sealed, repeating. I do not want to see who you voted for. If you want to vote for me for national delegate from North Carolina, I would appreciate it. If not, that's fine. But if you bring me your sealed ballot, I will, at my own cost, put a stamp on it for you because there's so much at stake with both the convention and especially that contract. I want to make sure that people vote.
I'm gonna get
I'm
my
actually
car and
pulling
drop the
something up.
ballot right
Y'all go
now.
ahead and talk. Speak among yourselves because I found a post that I think it's in one of the groups. I'm going to pull it up, and so I might break in and read it to you because this one pissed me off. But go ahead and keep going.
Okay, Bill, you talk about what you think. Do you think that an SNDC actually makes it easier to get people to participate in the union when it comes to the tentative agreement or the national delegate ballots?
Well, at the my SNDC, it doesn't. But like I said, you're not allowed to have conversations, on the floor. You're not allowed to step out of your case. There is no allowance for you to have any type of discussion on the floor. And when you go out to load your truck up, and 2 and 3 carriers go out to load up their vehicles, whether we just be with the parcels or we're with their full mail or whatever, the supervisor goes out on the dock and observes what you're doing, and they will actually come up and approach you in regards to having conversations in the parking lot. So, yeah, I'm telling you, and like I said, I came from Westchester, and in our office, you often had to yell over to the city carriers to keep it down because they were so loud. Okay, in this SDNC, you have over 300 plus carriers in there, and you don't hear anybody ever getting loud unless somebody's going off on the city side about an extra 2-hour pivot 45 minutes away from the end of their 6-hour route. So I mean, it's a jailhouse.
I,
It really is.
I'm sorry.
There's no advantage.
That supervisor does that to me. That supervisor does that to me. I'd be like, yeah, I need an 8191 now. I'm filing
And
a
I need an
grievance on that.
EEO.
And I need an EEO because as it stands, as long as you are doing work while talking, they cannot discipline you. They cannot tell you to be quiet. It's if you are standing around doing absolutely nothing and having a conversation about non-work related things that they can tell you to go back to work.
Also, James, wouldn't that be a violation of the joint statement on workplace violence?
Yes, it would, which is why the grievance would be filed.
Well, you don't understand. The district manager who works there, he's the one that initiates this type of action, because when the city carriers go out at 8 o'clock on the other routes in the office, not Westchester, but 8 o'clock, he is standing at the top of the stairs overlooking the entire parking lot for that section of carriers, observing them. And as
Definitely
far as
sounds like a hostile work environment to me.
yeah, well, it feels like it. Now, in regards to talking on the floor, there was actually, and God, I'd have to spend about 3 days digging it up. There was actually a grievance that was filed and settled in favor of the post office in regarding allowing carriers to speak on the floor. And it's been years before any of y'all ever started working in the post office. And when I read that,
Yep.
and I said, "Well, how the hell could somebody ever agree to that?" But I'll do some investigating on that and see if I can dig that up. But the fact of the matter was, they agreed that the post office had the right to require us to be silent on the work floor. And I was like, like you said, if it's work related, in certain situations, talking to a clerk or a supervisor, okay. So when one of the things came up about a misthrown package, and I took it and put it in the misthrow area, somebody said, "Well, did you ask if they're not allowed to speak on the floor?" you know, Sorry, I'm not allowed to speak on the floor, so I put it in the misthrow area.
Oh, you want to talk to me on the workroom floor? 8127 time in order to get paid for it, because that's not part of my duties, and you have a silence on the workroom floor rule. So if I'm going to be doing something outside of the current work rules in this office, I'm going to need 8127 time for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, and also I'm invoking my Weingarten rights because this could affect my terms of employment. Oh, I found the comment that I was speaking about.
Read it.
Is it related to this?
It's about ballots.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. It says, we have a ballot, and this is from the United We Scan Facebook group on the post that I made yesterday at 7:15. I'm very specific. This anonymous person writes, we have a ballot, no way of knowing anything about the people on the ballot. I want change. I don't know anything about the people on the ballot. In my state, there are 25 on the ballot, and 19 will be delegates even if no one votes. What is the point? Waste of postage.
And that's the problem that we're facing, because of the fact that people are so apathetic about the weight of their voice, the weight of their vote. They have total disdain in regards to being involved, because they haven't seen any clear changes, even though last year on the national board we had substantial changes. But the fact of the matter is they haven't seen anything that affects them personally in their office on a daily basis. They haven't seen any change in regards to pay, the toxic, harassing environment that they deal with every day. They haven't seen a change in regards to hiring practices. Let's get the hiring practices back in the hands of the local postmasters. I mean, I put in for an ARC position, and it was giving me simulated situations in regards to how to handle customer complaints.
Oh,
most
God.
of them, yeah, and most of them I said it was the RCA's fault. No, it wasn't. That wasn't the choice. But the fact of the matter is that, I'm sitting there laughing on, if you're applying for a position and you've never done it, how would you know how to handle these situations that they were throwing at you? It was just ridiculous. So, really, I understand the apathy, because of the fact that, our other locals around me, our state, our national board, everybody suffers from it. And, a testament to myself and James and you and Kristen and all the others, all our listeners, it's to the fact that you guys still listen, you still stand up, you still request information, you help other people. That's why we do this. We've had people, not quit the union, and not only not quit the union, but become stewards. We've had people put their names up for delegates, request information. That irritates the living shit out of me, James, when somebody goes on one of the Facebook platforms asking information and people belittle them. How long you been in the craft? Are you an RCA? It doesn't matter. They're reaching out for help. So instead of kicking them, give them a hand up.
Yeah.
Quit being such a piece of shit. We get that at work every day from the post office. We don't need it from our own craft.
We don't need to have our worst enemy be from within our own union. We got enough shit to deal with as it is.
There you go, Meow. There you go.
And I agree with you on that, Bill. And on top of that, going after the people that are running for positions and trying to put them down, or trying to do an aha gotcha moment with them, you're turning around and basically saying that you don't like the current person, but you're not willing to listen and support a person running against them. So if you're not willing to, you just don't support the person running, and you're against the person who's running against them, then sign your damn name up and run against them. Put your money where your mouth is and step up and do something about it, instead of just turning around and attacking everybody else. Be a man or a woman and stand up.
James, I when we were back in our office, years ago, about 5-6 years ago, and this one carrier, she's coming up on her retirement, last year and a half or whatever. And we had gone through a contract and something, and she's standing there just mouthing off, "This is why I'm getting out of the effing union. This, or no, I'm getting out of the effing job. Yeah, no, the effing union doesn't do anything." She hadn't been a union member since she was there 2 years, and then she pulled her dues. Now she's coming up on 30 years, and she's 28 years of free protection from the union, by the union, and she's mouthing off, and it was one of them days where Bill's last nerve was right on top of his bald ass head, and I just struck out and told her to shut the fuck up. You had no right to sit there, criticize anything that you're not involved in. There's nothing you believe in. You don't care. You want to get your job done. You want to go home at the end of the day. So, we leave you be. Shut your effing mouth, because you have no right if you have no involvement. You don't have a horse in this race. And I swear, half the people there clapped. Yeah. And then I got pulled in the office for using profanity on the floor.
And then you just turn around and throw the First Amendment on the desk.
No, I turned around, and frankly, I said to the supervisor at the time, who I really couldn't stand, and said, you need to watch your mouth. I says, no fucking problem.
It's kind of hard to. My eyes are up here. My mouth is here. My eyes don't look right there.
Oh, good God.
I just sit there and say, the biggest whiners I've ever had in my office were the non-union craft members. And it's like, it's like voting for, in politics. Don't complain if you're not registered and you don't vote. It's my right not to vote.
May I take a moment of personal privilege?
The chair recognized gentleman from North Carolina.
Okay. You talk about voting. In addition to being a union member and a mail carrier, I also work in elections. So when people say, "Oh, what's the point of voting?" I say, there have been times where there have been things decided by the thinnest of margins.
Yep.
Every vote counts. I don't know if y'all were watching the news, but we had a pretty nasty race here in North Carolina for a judge, and it got pretty heated. It came down to maybe 10,000 votes or something like that. But I've seen it closer than that. I've heard about things that are closer than that. When someone says, "What's the point in voting?" I'm like, why are you saying that? Then you're just conceding power to people that may not care about your best interests.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you give up such a right? I mean, I understand there's a lot of veterans in the Postal Service. Why would you give up a right to express your opinion about how your state, your locality, or your country's run, or your union in this case? And that's also spitting in the face of the men and women of the armed forces that are veterans that fought and died to give you that right to vote. Okay, off the soapbox, please continue.
No, you're right on the money there. These people saying that, well, why does my vote matter? Why does my vote matter? Guess what? There have been margins of less than 51%, but greater than 50% that contracts have passed for organizations. By the narrowest of margins, there have been contracts that have passed by only a difference of 20 votes. So, and that's hundreds of thousands of people for specific unions in some instances. So you saying your vote doesn't matter, it can matter. And on top of that, your vote could be one that turns it into a deciding factor or one that makes it a contentious factor where it's so close they have to count the ballots multiple times to make sure it's right. You can't take that risk. You need to vote your heart's desire on it. Now, if you don't know whether you want to vote for it or not, that's perfectly fine, as long as you have the right to vote. You can choose to abstain from voting as your right to vote, but you must have the ability to vote to exercise the abstaining of the vote.
So you want to go down that soapbox a little extra there, James?
Go ahead, Bill.
Let's go back to the American Revolutionary War. What kind of system would we have if the French hadn't intervened and helped the colonies? in regards to fighting the British. Okay. What would happen to Europe in regards to us not coming to assist them during World War I and World War II? What would happen if we didn't take a stand in Germany against the Russians? People sit there and they argue, oh well, we shouldn't have went to Iraq under the auspices of suspected WMDs in there. Well, the fact of the matter that I hate to inform people, but war is a political money-making machine. And whether they had suspected, WMDs or not, weapons of mass destruction or not, the fact of the matter is that as the world's police officer, U.S. gets involved to help quell hotspots based on what affects those areas can eventually affect us. Well, the fact of the matter is that Iraq was an unstable country in the first place with a neighbor of Iran who's even more unstable. Yeah, so we had to have some kind of solidifying government, installed in Iraq. And when those people got the opportunity to vote in Iraq, they had to stick their thumb into a jar of purple dye to show that they voted, and they couldn't vote again. But those people were brave enough to do so, knowing the Shiite and Sunnis that were in country in Iraq would likely kill them because voting would have went one way or the other against their party. But they were still brave enough to risk death, to vote, to speak up for their country because they wanted something better. Has it gotten much better? Yes, but only marginally. But at least it's stabilized. The same way when you have a problem with the immigration in regards to people coming over here and voting and swaying our elections. This is something that reminds me of that stupid ass series, Keith Sutherland, Designated Survivor. Okay, when it got to the end of their series, there somebody was altering DNA to possibly wipe out tan, brown, black, people without affecting their health, but making them sterile so that they could sway the elections back to the Caucasians, because by 2058, the Caucasians would be a minority. This is the same thing that happened by letting the borders open and giving people licenses or social security numbers. And okay, if you got a license, then you're automatically registered to vote. You're voting, you're not even a citizen of the country. These are the types of things that people have to realize how their votes affect how the country's going to do. And in our respect, how our craft's going to do. I saw more than enough where people turned around and said, I'm voting yes for this contract. Good for you. You're voting. We disagree with you. Voting yes says, sends the message that we agree that this is a good contract. And some people will say, well, I'm not saying it's a good contract. Yes, you are, because you're endorsing it. If you're endorsing the contract, that's a yes. Okay. If you vote no, you're telling both the post office and your union that you're not satisfied, that you don't think this is enough, that you don't think that this justifies all the crap we go through every day. This doesn't justify carrying parcels since 2018 and not being compensated when you're over 57.36 hours like I was for 6 years. This doesn't justify people breaking the contract. And then, I don't want to settle this grievance. Well, you broke the contract. And it doesn't justify leaving the stagnant leadership that we have at the top of the national board. Not that I'm endorsing James Brennan for National Rural Letter Carriers Association president for 2025. Shameless plug. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't chop the head of the snake off, you'll still get bit. And we got bit. Marginal, not even marginal, minimal gains on this contract with matching percentages to the NALC. And if this goes to arbitration, and if the arbitrator settles it in 2 days like they did on the city contract, which was, in negotiation for 2 years, you know that somewhere somebody is working with the post office against this craft. And the only way you change that is by removing the leadership. So if you don't get out and vote, don't blame nobody but yourself. If you're not a union member, too late for this year. Join back in, get involved, stand up, be a voice for reason, be a voice to protect those in your office that don't have the spine to stand up for themselves, and there's plenty of them. And there's a lot of people that are terrified to go against management. Just found out that our area steward in our office didn't want to file another grievance because management's already mad at them. I'm like, oh my God, you filed 2 grievances for a false EP on a carrier, and now they're mad at you. If management's mad at you, that means you're doing your damn job. That means you're calling them on the carpet. All right, I'm done. I need a drink.
But you're right, Bill, and there's more people can do. There's more things they can do. You can fight for change in your office. You can work with your NSS representatives to try and help make change throughout the system. You can engage the national board as best you can for some of them to make change through the system itself. I have helped plenty of carriers work their way up the chain to get a positive resolution for their situation. Whether that resolution actually resulted in them being right or wrong doesn't matter. But the fact was, we finally got them a resolution to what was going on. That's the most important thing. And this is a problem throughout the craft. We need a more responsive steward system through the craft, reaching out to these people. But at the same time, we need more people at the top being responsive to the craft. Now, I am only one man, and I am running against Don Maston for president. And we only had one other nominee step up, and that is for the executive committeeman position. I want to see every single position on the national board challenged, not because they deserve to be removed, not because they're a problem, but because they don't need to just coast into the position. They need to be fighting for this craft and fighting for that vote for themselves, not just mailing it in every single day. The problem is there's not enough people to step up. There's not enough people willing to step up. But we need people to step up. We need people to want to fight for this craft and want to fight for this career and want to fight for the future generations of this craft. Go ahead, Bill.
And that's one of my pet peeves, James, and to everybody listening. We have 50 states, and we have, Puerto Rico. I don't think we ever get anybody from Guam, do we?
No.
But the fact of the matter is that you have 50 states with 50 state presidents. You mean to tell me out of those 50 states, there's nobody more qualified or better than not even better qualified. It's better, more knowledgeable about our craft than the people on the national board, especially Don Matson's, who's been there since 2008. And I'm talking about state presidents who still deliver their own routes. I noticed something in Pennsylvania this past week. My state president, it sends an email out, and it's at nrlca.org. Why does not my state officer have a National Rural Letter Carrier Association address? Are they monitoring what our officers, state officers, are doing, what they're saying, what they're sending out? I thought we were supposed to be individuals. So this is just another my conspiracy, theory is that it's all about the control by the national board. My state board ought to be responding to the state craft, not the National Rural Letter Carriers Association.
That's another point of contention for a lot of people. There is, what is the point of a state board other than to run the state convention and drum up spring and fall boosters if they do those in a state magazine? But they're important too. I know that my state president is still carrying his route. I know that the only person that's full-time on my state board is the secretary, and with over 5,000, almost 5,000 carriers on the rolls for the dues-paying side of it, I can understand it a little bit. But the rest of them all still do work, and they also take care of state functions, getting things put together for that, as well as trying to make things better in the state of Michigan. Just like Josh said in the chat here, different Josh, everyone except the Secretary Treasurer of North Carolina, the whole board runs their routes too. And that's something that is very important to think about. A lot of state board members still do work their routes or are involved in some aspect of carriers. So
So let me
they still have the ground truth. They should be involved in more aspects of this union than they currently are. I'm going to say that.
so let me ask you this, James. Okay, and you can check the data on this. But with 50 states and people working their way up the ladder, like everybody proposes that you have to do to earn the right to be on the national board, out of the 50 states, we don't have anybody qualified to run for the national board. Now we've had people run, but where do most of these people come from, James?
The state boards,
No, the NSS.
them too. But so, and this is what I've determined is the path that you're supposed to take. You're either supposed to go through the NSS system or the state board system, and then you come on to the national board as an executive committeeman. Now you can do the executive committeeman for only so many years. You can do it for 1 year and move up into a national officer, a resident officer position after just 1 year if needed. But most often you'll probably run as an executive committeeman for 2 or 3 elections before you get moved up to another position. At least it was 2 times for Mr. Maston to get up to presidency. Jeanette Dwyer has been back and forth between a resident officer and an executive committeeman, but she is up off the board this election in August. Nikki Phillips has been on the board for many years as well. That's the pattern. That's the path they want everybody to take to get there. Because apparently, somehow, you learn how to do all those positions, starting at the executive committeeman, to be a president of the union just by being an executive committeeman non-resident officer, I guess. I don't know. But you also learn that how to be friends with management that way as well.
Well, and the thing that gets me is that you'll have all these legislative committees bringing people from across the country in, put them up and all that, go meet their senators or congressmen, and which is fine and dandy. Okay, you're making your presence felt and all that. But the fact of the matter is that when you get to the executive committee person's position, you're basically based out of your own home. You're full time. You're traveling around in the country and all that. So, what type of experience is that giving you for vice president? Well, not much. Or president? Well, none at all. Well, what about the Department of Labor Relations? Okay, unless you're in the National Steward System, then they're going to say it's unrelated. Well, what about Director of Steward Operations? Well, again, if you're not in the National Stewards, system, it's not related. So that puts you into a pickle where you're incumbent on one program, the National Steward System, to kind of propagate your next crop of officers. Well, I'm sorry, because with all the turmoil that we've seen in the National Steward System in the last 3 to 5 years, pickings have been slim. The fact of the matter that, we have people, the DRs that are being removed. We have ADRs being removed. We've had ADRs quit. We've had, local stewards decertified, shameless plug. That still hasn't been resolved by the National Labor Relations Board. But the fact of the matter is that it's almost like when the NSS was created, the National Board was already propagating the seedlings for the future. And like you said, James, you got to go up the ladder. How well has that served us in the past 10 or 15 years? It hasn't. How well has that served us in regards to REC's implementation, transparency, as well as the actual, direct mini mail survey, the mini mail survey dispute forms, where a lot of your disputes are coming back, no action required, or not being resolved at all. They are formulating and propagating from seedling the individuals they want to work up the ladder just to ensure their own support until they're ready to retire. Because Don's not going back to his route. Patrick Pitts may not. I don't know. But I'll guarantee you, Nikki's not going back to his route. John Adams would, but I don't think he has to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is seen as their plotted plan to go into their golden years. And as the next increase, they will be making $200,000 a year. And Daryl says that better have having 3-year terms. I'd like to see 2-year terms on the president, vice president, and the secretary treasurer.
And I will argue. I will argue against. I will argue against that only on one condition, and that is because we are still under the delegate system. It should be
Right.
every year, so that way, if somebody is extremely terrible at that job, or somebody has really royally screwed the pooch when it comes to that position, they could be voted out within a year. Look at what the city carriers are dealing with their 4-year term with
Right.
Renfro.
You'd have
If you were to go to a 2-year term, then I would only do that if we had one person, one vote nationwide.
Yep.
But the other issue with that is just like the city carriers are dealing with, the CLC, which is running against the Renfro team for 2026, has to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to advertise themselves out there to try and beat out Renfro. Now you're adding costs to people, and especially for carriers on Table 2, they're not going to be able to afford that to run against incumbents that get close to $250,000 in income plus incentives. So it's very hard to figure out what would be the best approach to do that when you're talking about a system that is literally top heavy in income compared to people that could run against them. And we're coming up soon, we're going to be at the precipice where there's going to be more Table 2 carriers in the union than there are Table 1 carriers. So that's something else that our current national board needs to think about, because once that scale is tipped, then there is no way that management is going to ever bring Table 2 up to Table 1 levels. So you have to think of the future on all this stuff. You have to think about what the impact is of what you do. You have to think about this contract right here, this one that we have. And I'm going to just say this. This contract screws us over for the next 2 contracts minimum if we were to pass it. Minimum. Because we're setting ourselves up for pattern bargaining with the city carriers already. We're setting ourselves up for accepting low wage increases, and Diet Cola, all with the fear of losing Diet Cola and Christmas overtime. Just the fear of it. Because it's not guaranteed we'll lose that. But it's just the fear. The fear-mongering works, especially for those who are not educated in the system. Do you agree, Bill and Josh?
100%.
Yes, definitely 100%. We've got to get constitutional changes in there for one person, one vote. Okay, but we definitely need to get term limits in there. That is a must. Okay, I mean, if you haven't, like somebody said, like James said, if you get people in there for a length of service and you can't get rid of them, like the NLAC, can't get rid of Renfro, we can institute, constitutional language in regards to removal. And the removal cannot be based just on the national board. It should be also based on state boards too. That there's a greater range of voice as well as observation in regards to what the national officers are doing or not doing. It would be hard to get it done on a individual carrier type vote, but the fact of the matter is that the state officers dealing with the national office would have a better line of sight in regards to performance issues that we're dealing with now. And with this TA that's out there, I'd say somebody's having more performance issues than an 80-year-old man with ED.
Oh, Jesus.
Wow.
Me.
But
yes, ladies and gentlemen, he went there. Holy crap.
Well, I'm sorry.
But the key to it is that we need to focus on educating our craft, educating our carriers, educating our steward system, and most of all, educating the national board on what's going on down here. and actually getting them to listen to it and understand that when we ask a question, we expect an answer, not to have it be called a bullshit question.
Oh, you had to go there, didn't you? Jeez.
Yes, I did. Because
Yeah.
that was a failure on the national board. The carriers honestly asked the questions to get an honest answer from our national board. If they thought it was a quote-unquote bullshit question, why the hell did they pick it up and actually read it for everybody just to call it a bullshit question on the floor? That was unprofessional. It had no tact. So I'm going to call it out as often as I can. Yeah, I agree, Rich. It was intentional. It was intentional. And it was a disrespect to the craft members in audience. And I bet you it also cost us a few first-time attendees for that.
I'm pretty sure the vernacular you're going for, James, is one-timers.
Yeah, they're one and done. They came once, they saw what was going on, and said, I'm not coming back because this is bullshit.
It's kind of like what happened last year at the national convention when and correct me if I am wrong, I think there was two or three instances where someone had to assert personal privilege to address bullying occurring amongst the body at the convention.
Yes, it was myself, Debbie Hernandez, and President Maston made a statement on it as well. And that's another thing. On the floor of the convention hall, you can have your opinions. You can say, oh, I'm not going to vote for that person. But when you start attacking people verbally or even physically by getting into their face about it, that is unprofessional on the caucus floor. The body is supposed to be the voice of the craft, and you can't be the voice of the craft if the voice is divided.
Rich, you're correct. It is disingenuous.
All right.
Yeah, there were other.
He's got to go to timeout corner for using a big word.
But the thing about it really is, I agree with another commenter on here that the way they did that was to try and get people to subconsciously self-censor themselves, to get them to not ask questions like that. Because unfortunately, that carrier that wrote that question truly hit a nerve, because they turned around and told the president of the union, you sound just like management.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't wrong. They weren't wrong.
And I bring up what happened last year at the convention because as a second timer, I was surprised, not surprised, that a group of people that should be backing each other, should be showing respect to each other, not acting like management, was doing that. I was both shocked and not shocked. But does that excuse it? Absolutely not. That is, to me, what I call a tell. And you're telling me that you're very insecure about something or you're ignorant about something.
Well, I thought it was very telling that at the end, when we're hearing appeals and the one lady was getting attacked again and again and again, and I'm sitting there going, well, hold it. There's three sides to a story: yours, hers, and the truth. But we didn't get to hear hers or the truth, did we?
We didn't get to hear any side of it other than the side accusing her.
Yeah, as I said, there's hers, the truth. And I was just like, hold it. This is how you treat a member? And, I thought, the decorum aspect of, that process was, completely out of line, uncalled for, unprofessional. And it was downright disappointing to see people act like that. I mean, I remember when Dominic Crooks had his, 83 or 85 appeals. And, here's people that, weren't even half as smart as this gentleman is. But, the fact is that smart people threaten people. And, I've seen this before in the post office on a local level. And they didn't know how to respond. Well, their response was to threaten him with, something like, $200,000 of billing for all the hours they had to spend, filing the charges or responses on his appeals. That's the due process, folks. And if he wants to wait to the last minute to respond to your certified letter, he's well in his rights to do so. He doesn't have to answer it in 48 hours or 72 hours. He can take all the time he wants to make a well-informed and factually backed argument to your response. But again, here we are. We got into a situation where the national board whipped the floor up into a frenzy to the point where they wanted him, charged for the monies expended, to fight these appeals. And he ended up with a 5-year ban, being in the craft, the union itself,
being involved in the craft. He got a 5-year ban from being a member in good standing.
Oh, so that means they'll still take his money?
They'll still take his money. He just has no standing as a member. But you said it wrong, though, Bill. You said the word due process. And unfortunately, what you saw there was the undue process.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the problem when you have individuals who use people's fear. Again, their fear. And the fear is, oh, we're spending all this money. I'm sorry. What the hell are my dues paying for if not to, one, defend the craft, and two, defend the union in situations like that, or defend the carrier in a situation like that? He paid his dues just like I did. I would expect his bills to be covered. I would expect my bills to be covered on that. But yet they whip them into a frenzy about the cost of things to get them to vote the way they want. We saw this last year when I put up the resolution that PTS should not pay full dues because many instances they aren't working 5 days a week. They're only guaranteed 2 days a week, but they're paying regular carrier dues. And they made a huge deal about how much it would hurt the union. Yet here we are with the new national agreement coming out, the opportunity for more PTF positions. They could have more than made up the cost of the losses of the current PTFs with all the new PTFs that are coming in. But they didn't calculate that out. They just calculated out just the losses alone. But that's the fear-mongering they do, and unfortunately, because a lot of people don't look deeper into the situation, they're going to vote with their emotions instead of logic.
And trust me, as someone who... Oh, sorry, James, you were speaking.
Go ahead.
As someone who works in the elections outside of the union, I will say people tend to vote with their emotions chiefly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that you need to take into account the whole thing before you decide to check the box.
Yeah. It's the same for anybody running for position. Two, you have to look at the whole scenario that you're going into. You have to look into what you want to do with it, how you want to manage it, how you want to make things happen. You can't just on a whim drop a bunch of money and run for a position. Well, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to know what you're going into. You're supposed to know the loopholes and legal liabilities and things like that when you run for a position like that. And you have to understand, especially in our situation, that no matter what, the craft has to come first.
Mm-hmm.
The craft has to be first, last, and everything in between in what you do. Because when you lose sight of that, you become management's best friend. And you can call them by their first name because they know you're going to roll over for the craft every time you walk in the room with them.
I'd like to posit a theory. If I, for example, was ever nominated and won, don't ever think that I'm asking to run for office because I'm still kind of up in the air about it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we need somebody to nominate him for a national board officer position.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, God.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Bill will do it.
Crap.
There you go. You just
Right.
you opened your mouth. You opened your mouth. Now insert your foot.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Well, here's what I would say. If I take this position, I will have in the forefront of my mind every day that I am working for the benefit of the craft and for the benefit of the union members. And also, I will have in my mind, if at any time I screw up, I want the people to tell me. I am a person that works best when I am told what, when, and how I screwed up if I did. I'm not looking to screw up, but if I screw up, I want people to tell me to my face.
I'll do that too.
Yeah, I respond a
And
lot better when I hear someone's complaint about me to my face rather than them going behind my back.
Yep, if you've got a problem with me, come to me with it.
Yep.
Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out together. You know, I'm not going to get upset that you've got a problem with me.
No,
I'd rather talk it out with you and figure out what the actual problem is and maybe figure out a solution to it. And at the
that
end, you
being
may
said,
still not like me, but at least you'll know I respect you.
that being said, you can come to me, you can speak to me about something you disagree with me with. However, I will ask that you present a certain level of decorum because I am the kind of person that if you come to me, start cussing me out, my wall goes up. I'm like, no, you're going to act like an adult.
Now you're just asking too much there.
I know.
You want me to act like an adult? What? Oh. And make sure you pack your suit for National then.
I don't own a suit for a reason.
Billy's going to need help with a suit.
No,
I'll get them fitted and paid for there.
There you go.
oh shit.
Hey, I'll even get your ass in for a pedicure and a manicure. Get your eyebrows waxed and everything. I'll do the Brazilian wax in our
Kelly
room.
Clarkson, that's all I gotta say. Just as long as you don't do chest waxing like on the 40-year-old virgin, I'm good.
Well, ask James about that. That doesn't work out.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And on that note, Josh, your final thoughts for the evening.
My final thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, convention season is coming up. The national ratification ballots are out. The national delegate ballots are out. Please, please. As far as I'm concerned, every one of us, even if we're on table 2, step 1, can afford a 73-cent stamp. You will receive your ballot. Open the ballot and mark it and send it back. Please post early. Do not wait. I am cautiously optimistic that at least the ratification ballot will garner more support than ratification ballots passed. And for my state, North Carolina, we have a not so great return rate. That gets on my nerves, one, because I'm me, and number two, because I work in elections. I don't like the few deciding for the many. So please, you receive your ballot, you open it, you vote, and vote how you want your interests to be represented. These people that are on these ballots, we figured it out. They represent the hopes and dreams for the national convention of about 100 people. So if you have someone on that ballot that you know represents you, by God, vote them in. And I would like to, this is late for this year, but I would like to appeal to RCAs, ARCs, and PTFs. Please, next year, get involved and go to the convention. Even if you have to pay your own dime, I am sure if you ask nicely, there might be a nice person that might let you in their room and you contribute part to the bill. We need more people in here. We need the newer generation of carriers. Retirees, yes, they have their place. Current carriers, they have their place, but we need the up and coming generation, especially the up and coming carriers that are younger. We need to get them involved because at the end of the day, we're all in this together and we are making this union not just for us, but for years down the line. Bill, your thoughts.
Oh, well, I have to reiterate your message in regards to the ballot because I have mine sitting on my desk and I'm allowed to select 43. Of course, I've only selected 17. And that's, I don't have to select all 43. I can select one. I can select 43. I can select 17 like I have. And the people I'm nominating for as delegates are all people A, that are interested in helping the craft, B, who have supported me and have my like interest in minds in regards to the craft's betterment. So I sit there and I go through the thing, and it's like we get 43, we've got 78 people here, and 26 of them are retirees. And the retirees get voted on their name recognition alone. And it's a shame. Vote for somebody you know of. If you're not sure, just vote for yourself or vote for somebody you do know. Just fill out one name on the ballot and send it in. Don't fill out the whole thing just to get the maximum number there. You're not required to do that. And don't vote for people, like I said, on name recognition, because a lot of them aren't representing your views. I don't mean to dissuade anybody from voting for anybody in the NSS, because I voted for 2. I'm not saying not to vote for people who are on your state board. I'm voting for 1 there. But the fact of the matter is, you need to vote. This is, what your dues pay for. This gives you your voice, your opportunity to turn around and have a say in who's representing you at the national convention, and who's going to have a say on the floor, if they wish, in regards to what they want this board to do and who they want this board to be. So don't take this lightly. Again, Josh says, he's used to, the elections on the political front, and this is no different. 22 to 26% of the people will control what over 120,000 carriers, or 130, depending on the number they're throwing out this week, what their futures will be like. So take a minute to invest in your future. It's just like learning Rex or RCAM or the M38, the 603, the Elm. Take a minute, invest in your future, invest in your paycheck, and learn to protect yourself. Learn to, exercise your right to speak and to have a voice in your future. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, the weather is trying to come around a bit. It's still a little cool here in Pennsylvania. But the fact of the matter is that, kids are, a lot more active out there. Watch for them in the streets, in between cars and everything, and animals too. They're going to be out there too. But be safe, be professional, be efficient, do the job to the best of your ability, and then get your ass home, because you're the most important delivery of the day, and your job will always be filled, but you can never be replaced. James?
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you guys stepping up to speak tonight. You're right, Bill. It's important that we all step up and do our duty to this craft, to this career, to each other. And I'm going to step a little bit on you, Josh, there. I believe that even the older RCAs, the ones that have 5, 10, 15 years in as RCAs, are just as important as at these conventions as new generation as well, because they're still going to have to spend 10, 20 years working as a regular carrier after the time they put in as an RCA, until we can get the House and Senate to pass the buyback bill. So they're just as important too to make a voice on the situations that are going on as a non-career member of the craft. So everybody is important in this situation. Every single carrier that can vote should vote, because that's the only way we can make change in this craft, is if everybody starts stepping up and stepping to make change. Now, it doesn't mean the change is actually a real change. It could be keeping some things the same. But unless we use our voice to say what we do and don't like, they're not going to know it. Sure, you could talk about the Postal Pulse survey that's a piece of garbage that doesn't really actually answer any problem as a voice, but the tentative agreement ballot is the ultimate voice of the craft, followed by the national delegate ballot, followed by the state delegate ballots, if you get those. If enough people actually step up to participate in each of their local areas for their state convention, then there could be votes for state convention. But a lot of places, there aren't enough people stepping up as nominations for their state convention to even warrant having an election. Everyone gets in by unanimous decision because there weren't enough people to fill all the slots. That is where we need to step up and make a difference. Not only at national convention, but our states too. Our locals. There are locals that aren't getting enough people to even hold a quorum. Some locals are getting dissolved and merged with others so they can have just enough people at their meetings to hold a quorum. The time to step up for this craft is now. The time to step up for your fellow brothers and sisters is now, whether it's on the vote or in your office. I know Josh said my line earlier here, but I do mean it when I say, at the end of the day, no matter what, we're all in this together. We'll see you guys all here next week unless we have something special come up. So join us back here again at the same time, same place. Good night, everybody.
And goodbye from 3 boys and a dog.
Good night and good luck.